The Arizona sun melted the horizon into a trembling haze, as if the air itself couldn't decide whether to breathe or burn. The rocks around us glowed like iron fresh from a forge, deep reds, scorched oranges, veins of gold catching the light. I remember thinking how the desert always told the truth. No distractions, no shelter, just raw earth and heat. Maybe that's why I brought her here. I thought if we stripped away everything else, we'd find what was left of us. Claire walked a few steps ahead, her boots sinking lightly into the sand. She wore that wide-brimmed hat she bought just for this trip, her hair tied up, the wind catching stray strands that brushed the back of her neck. Even from behind, I could tell something was off. Her steps were measured, too deliberate. She wasn't taking in a landscape, the way the wind whistled between the rocks, the scent of dust and dry sage. Her mind was somewhere far away, and not with me. I tried to smile, to start a conversation about the view or the heat, anything that would sound normal. Feels like walking through fire, doesn't it? I said, forcing a laugh. She didn't turn around. It's beautiful, she said, but her voice was flat. Beautiful. That word used to mean something when she said it. When she said it about me. The guidebook mentioned a detour, a small cave a few hundred feet off the main trail. Hey, want to check that out? I asked. It's supposed to be pretty cool inside. She shrugged. Sure. If you want. If you want. That's how she spoke to me now, like everything was my decision, my responsibility to keep things alive, while she quietly drifted away. We climbed off the path and into a narrow passage between two massive red stones. The air changed immediately, cooler, calmer. The sound of the wind softened into a low hum that echoed faintly through the rock walls. It felt like stepping into a secret, the kind of place people disappeared into centuries ago and never came out from. Inside, the space widened just enough for us to walk side by side. Claire turned on her flashlight, sweeping the beam across the walls. The rocks glimmered faintly, streaked with mineral veins that shimmered like silver. I tried to make a joke, something about treasure hidden in the desert, but she only smiled faintly and said, maybe you'll find something worth keeping. That line stayed with me longer than it should have. We walked deeper, the light from the cave entrance shrinking behind us. Our footsteps echoed, uneven, overlapping like mismatched heartbeats. The air smelled faintly metallic. I reached for her hand without thinking, the way I used to when she got nervous during storms or movies. She didn't pull away, but her hand felt limp in mine, cold despite the heat outside. You okay? I asked. She hesitated. Yeah, just tired. Her tone wasn't tired. It was distant, final. We stopped near a wall where faint carvings were etched into the stone, some ancient tribal markings, maybe. I crouched to trace them with my fingers, dust coating my skin. Look at this, I said. It's like someone wanted to be remembered. Claire didn't move closer. She stood in the half-light, the beam of her flashlight shaking slightly in her hand. Maybe they were just lost, she said quietly. Her face looked ghostly in the beam, half-shadowed, half-lit. There was a sadness there I couldn't name, but also something colder. Like she had already decided on something I hadn't been told about yet. I stepped closer. Claire. She looked at me then, finally meeting my eyes. For a second, I thought I saw her, the real her, the woman who used to fall asleep on my chest and whisper about the future like it was a story we were writing together. But that warmth vanished as quickly as it came. What? She asked. I didn't know what I wanted to say. That I missed her? That I was scared? That I could feel something ending between us, but couldn't figure out how to stop it? Instead, I said nothing. The silence stretched. Outside, the desert wind howled faintly through the narrow opening, carrying sand like whispers. I could feel sweat cooling on my neck, a bead sliding down my spine. When she moved closer to adjust the flashlight, her arm brushed mine, just a touch, but it was enough to spark that old current that used to ignite between us. My breath caught, and for a heartbeat, I thought she felt it too. But her eyes didn't soften. She looked away. We kept walking until the path narrowed again, the walls pressing close on both sides. I heard her breathing, steady but shallow. The cave's air was heavy now, and every sound seemed magnified. The scuff of our boots, the soft click of the flashlight. Let's head back soon, she said. It's getting late. Sure, I answered. But neither of us moved. Something in me wanted to say it, don't leave me like this. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the rocks, feeling smaller by the second. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating. And yet, part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, this trip would fix us. That the desert would burn away the lies and leave only the truth. I didn't know then how close I was to finding that truth, or how much it would destroy me. We almost turned back. The air inside the cave had grown still, heavy with a kind of weighting that made my skin crawl. But then, as I swept my flashlight across the far wall, I saw it. A thin fracture in the stone, no wider than my shoulders. A faint draft came from it, cool and constant, as if the desert itself was breathing through the rock. Hey, I said, pointing. There's something behind here. Claire glanced at it without much interest. It's just a crack, Ethan. No, look, there's space on the other side. You feel that? I waved my hand near the opening, the cool air sliding over my skin. It's hollow back there. She sighed. You really want to crawl through that? I smiled, trying to sound light. Adventure, remember? You used to love this stuff. Her mouth twitched, half a smile, half a grimace. That was a long time ago. I knelt by the opening, peering inside. My flashlight barely reached past the narrow slit, but I could make out the faint curve of another chamber beyond. The walls shimmered slightly with moisture, as if the rock was sweating. It was beautiful in a strange, secret way. Come on, I said. It's just a few meters. Before she could object, I squeezed in. The stone was rough and unyielding, scraping my shirt, pressing into my shoulders. The sound of my own breathing filled the small space, ragged, echoing. I pushed with my knees, dragging myself forward inch by inch until I was halfway through. The air smelled of iron and wet dust. Behind me, Claire's flashlight beam flickered along the walls. Be careful, she said. Her voice was flat again. I missed the way it used to sound, warm, teasing, alive. I shifted forward another few inches, then stopped. My shoulder caught against a jagged edge. Damn, I muttered. Hold the light here, would you? The beam moved lazily, barely touching the spot I needed. No, higher, yeah, there. I tried to push, but the rock dug deeper. It's wedged, I said. Can you help me move this stone a bit? She hesitated. What do you mean? Just push on this side. If we both. I don't think I can, she said quickly. I frowned. What? Claire, it's not heavy. Just put your hands here, and... I said I can't. Her voice echoed sharply through the narrow space, startling me. The light wavered. For a moment, the only sound was our breathing. Mine fast, hers steady. Claire, I said, twisting as much as I could to look back. What's going on? No answer. Claire, come on. Just a little help, and we'll go back. The flashlight beam shook again, darting away from me, scattering across the cave wall. Then her voice came, low and strange. Ethan, stop. Something in her tone froze me. It wasn't fear, it was decision. Cold, deliberate. Stop what? Trying, she said. Please. The words didn't make sense. Trying what? Claire, I'm stuck. Just give me a... I can't, she repeated. The silence that followed felt endless. The air between us thickened. I could hear her breathing, calm now, controlled. My flashlight slipped slightly in my hand, the beam bouncing across the stone, and I caught a glimpse of her silhouette, rigid, distant, like she was already somewhere else. Then I heard it, the faintest shuffle of her boots on the sand, moving back. Claire. My voice cracked. Where are you going? She didn't answer. I strained against the rock, the edges biting into my skin. Panic flared hot in my chest. Claire. Just shine the light again. Please. The beam flickered once, as if she'd hesitated. Then it steadied on the floor. She stood there, half in shadow, holding the flashlight loosely at her side. Her face was unreadable. The cave seemed to shrink around us, the walls pulsing with every breath. What's happening? I asked. Why are you? I need to tell you something, she interrupted. Her voice was calm now. Too calm. Tell me what? She looked down. Not here, she said softly. Not like this. Then help me out of here. I shouted. Whatever it is, we'll talk. Her eyes met mine. For a second, something flickered there. Remorse, maybe, but it vanished just as quickly. She took a slow step back, the beam of light slipping from my face to the wall beside me. I can't do this anymore, Ethan. Do what? Pretend. And with that, she turned. Claire. I yelled. The word echoed like a scream swallowed by stone. I struggled again, ignoring the pain tearing through my arm. Dust rained down on my face as I pushed, but the rock wouldn't move. I could still see her silhouette at the entrance to the chamber, faint, trembling. She stood there for a long time, breathing shallowly. Then the light dimmed as she stepped away. Claire. My voice broke this time. Don't go. But she didn't answer. Only her footsteps, soft and uneven, fading into the distance. For the first time, I felt something colder than fear settle in my stomach. The realization that maybe she wasn't coming back. That this wasn't a mistake or panic or confusion. This was choice. And I was on the wrong side of it. At first, I thought she'd gone to get help. That was the kind of person Claire used to be, the one who'd panic, then calm down, then come back with a plan. So I waited. I counted seconds, then minutes. The air in the crack grew stale, the taste of metal heavy on my tongue. My flashlight beam dimmed to a pale cone of light trembling on the rock ahead. Claire. I called again, softer this time. I'm fine. I just need a little help, that's all. Nothing. Only the faint sound of my own pulse echoing in my ears. I shifted, trying to free my shoulder. The stone tore at my sleeve and skin, the pain sharp but grounding. It reminded me I was still here, still real. I took a deep breath and tried again. Claire, please. Talk to me. Then I heard her voice. It was faint, coming from somewhere just outside the crack. I can't. 2 words, barely audible. What do you mean you can't? I said, pushing against the rock again. You just have to help me move this. I can't, Ethan. There was something in her tone, steady, final. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was something like resignation. Claire, what's going on? Silence again, then a sound like a deep breath. When she spoke next, her voice was clearer, as if she had made peace with what she was about to say. I love someone else. For a moment, my mind refused to translate the words into meaning. The desert heat, the exhaustion, the adrenaline, they all blurred into static. What? I said, laughing dryly. You're joking. I didn't want to tell you here, she continued, her tone calm, detached. But I can't keep pretending. I've made my choice. Her words sliced through the air like a blade. My chest tightened, anger and disbelief tangling into something unrecognizable. You brought me out here for this? This trip was a goodbye, she said. I thought maybe it would make things easier. Easier. I laughed again, a sound that came out broken. You brought me into the middle of the desert to tell me you're leaving me? You couldn't wait until we were back home. I didn't know how else to say it. Something inside me cracked. Who is it? She hesitated, but only for a moment. You wouldn't understand. Oh, I think I would. My voice was shaking now. It's him, isn't it? Your boss, Dylan. She didn't answer. That was enough. Jesus, Claire. After everything. I didn't plan this, Ethan, she said quickly. It just happened. We connected in ways you and I stopped connecting a long time ago. Her words stung worse than the rock grinding into my shoulder. You're serious, I said. You actually mean this? I do. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. Instead, I pressed my forehead against a stone, the roughness biting into my skin. After all we've been through, after everything we built together. Things change, she said quietly. People change. Then why bring me here? I said. Why not just leave? Her answer came like a whisper. I needed to see if I could say it. To your face. Congratulations, I spat. You managed it. The silence stretched again. I thought I heard her sniffle, but it might have just been the wind crawling through the cave. Claire, don't do this, I said finally. Come back. We can fix it. She didn't respond. Please, I begged. I love you. The sound that followed was soft, almost tender. A sigh. Then she said, "I'm sorry." Something clattered near the entrance, a dull metallic sound. I craned my neck and saw the beam of her flashlight tumble, hit the rock, and roll toward me, spinning lazily until it landed near my arm. The light wavered, painting the walls in trembling gold. "Claire." But when I looked toward the gap, she was gone. I shouted until my throat burned. Her name echoed through the chamber, bouncing back at me over and over, mocking me with my own desperation. "Claire." The flashlight flickered once, then again, before finally dimming to a weak pulse. In the half-dark, I thought I heard her voice one last time, faint, like a memory carried by the wind. "Goodbye, Ethan." And then nothing. I slammed my fist against the rock over and over until my knuckles split. The pain felt distant, unreal. I couldn't tell if I was crying or just sweating, but the salt stung my lips all the same. It hit me slowly, like a cold wave crawling up from my feet. She wasn't coming back. She had left me there, not out of panic, not by accident, but by choice. The woman I had loved, trusted, shared my life with had just walked away and left me to die in the dark. I don't remember how long I sat there after that. Time dissolved. The light dimmed further until there was only a faint orange glow, and then even that disappeared. The silence became a living thing, pressing against me, whispering in my ear. The cave smelled of dust and betrayal. Somewhere deep inside me, something else woke up that night, a part of me that didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't forgive. A part that would remember. The silence became a living thing. It crept into my lungs, filled the space between my heartbeats. I don't know how long I sat there after she left. Hours, maybe days. Time didn't move right anymore. The dark had swallowed everything except the ache in my body and the echo of her words. "I love someone else." They played on a loop, more poisonous each time. At first, I tried to stay rational. I told myself she'd come back. Maybe guilt would drag her back to the cave. Maybe she'd tell herself she'd gone too far. But deep down, I already knew she wouldn't. Claire wasn't the type to undo what she decided. Once she crossed a line, it disappeared behind her forever. I shifted, trying to move my shoulder from the crack, but the rock didn't budge. My arm had gone numb, pinned beneath my weight. The skin was raw, the muscle stiff. I tried using my belt as leverage, but it slipped against the smooth surface. The sound of leather scraping stone was deafening. I shouted again, hoarse, each word clawing its way out of my throat. "Claire, come back." Nothing. Not even an echo this time, like the cave had decided my voice didn't matter anymore. The air grew colder as night fell outside. I could feel it, the drop in temperature, the dampness settling into my clothes. My flashlight flickered weakly, casting trembling shadows that made the cave seem to move around me. I thought about her face, the calmness when she said it, the absence of guilt. She'd looked relieved. That's what broke me more than anything. Not the betrayal, but the peace she carried while cutting me open with the truth. I remember the small things, the way she used to hum when brushing her hair, the curve of her neck when she leaned over me in bed, the scent of her skin after rain. All of it felt like lies now, carefully built moments leading to this. Maybe she'd been planning it for weeks, maybe months. Every laugh, every kiss before this trip might have been her practicing her goodbye. I started laughing then, a low, ugly sound that turned into a cough. The air was thick with dust. My lips were dry and cracked, my throat raw. The taste of blood crept into my mouth. I rested my head against the rock, breathing through the pain. I told myself to think, to plan, to do something. But every thought circled back to her. The nights in bed when she'd turn away, saying she was tired. The business trips that always lasted a day longer than she promised. The way she started locking her phone, keeping it face down on the table. I'd known something was wrong, but I convinced myself it was temporary. That love could fix distance if you just held on long enough. What a fool I was. At some point, exhaustion took over. I drifted in and out of sleep, dreaming of sunlight and her laughter. That same laugh that used to pull me out of bad days. But even in dreams, she turned away. Always walking, never looking back. When I woke, I had no idea if it was morning or night. My flashlight had died completely, leaving only the faintest glow from the slit of the entrance far behind me. My throat burned when I tried to swallow. My body screamed for water. I tore off part of my shirt and sucked at the fabric, hoping for moisture. There was none. By what must have been the second night, I started talking to her, or the version of her that lived inside my head. "Why, Claire?" I whispered. "Why bring me here? You could have just left." Her voice answered in my memory, soft and cruel. I needed to see if I could say it. "You could have told me at home," I said. "Anywhere else. Not here." But even as I said it, I understood. She wanted me to feel small, powerless. Maybe she wanted to make sure I didn't follow her. Maybe she wanted me to disappear quietly, swallowed by sand and stone. And maybe she succeeded. I stopped shouting. There was no point. My voice was gone, my throat raw. I tried conserving energy, counting breaths, marking time by the rhythm of my heartbeat. But the silence began to change. It wasn't empty anymore, it whispered. Sometimes, I swore I could hear her voice echoing from the dark. "Ethan." Other times, it was Dylan's, that deep, smug tone from the photos she'd shown me months ago, pretending he was just her mentor. They laughed together in my head, their voices blending into a cruel melody. I told myself it wasn't real, that the cave was just playing tricks. But the more I heard them, the more real it felt. "Was he worth it, Claire?" I muttered. "Was it worth leaving me here?" The silence answered like a smirk. My mind began to drift. I saw flashes, her body arching under his touch, the same sound she used to make with me, the same breathy moans she'd whispered against my ear. It burned me alive. Even dying in the dark, I couldn't escape the image of her pressed against him, her fingers tangled in his hair, her lips parting for his name. I slammed my head back against the stone, needing the pain to wash it away. For a moment, I almost felt clarity, a single, sharp line of purpose cutting through the haze. If I got out, I'd make sure she'd remember me, not as the man she left behind, but as the one she'd never escape. When I finally stopped moving, my breath came in short, ragged bursts. The night was cold now. My body trembled uncontrollably. I knew if I didn't find a way out soon, the desert would claim me by morning. But even as my vision blurred, one thought anchored me. She wanted me gone. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I woke up to pain. Not the sharp kind, the slow, creeping kind that feels like fire beneath the skin. My body had stiffened against a stone. Every breath scraped through my chest like sandpaper. My tongue was dry, cracked against my teeth. My lips bled when I tried to call her name again. But I didn't call for her this time. Not really. I knew she was gone. What I whispered into the dark was just the ghost of her name, the sound of habit, not hope. The cave smelled of iron and dust. My body was weak, but something in me refused to die there. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival. Maybe, at that point, they were the same thing. I looked down at my belt, leather, thick, stiff with age. I'd used it to keep my jeans up. Now it was going to save me. I looped it around the stone pinning my shoulder, tightening the buckle, creating a makeshift lever against the wall. My flashlight was dead, but I could feel the shape of the rock with my hands, the contours, the pressure point. "Move," I whispered. "Come on, move." I pushed until the edges tore into my palms. Blood slicked the surface, made it harder to grip. I cursed under my breath and tried again. My arm screamed, my chest burned, but the stone didn't budge. Minutes blurred into hours. I lost track of how many times I tried, how many times I nearly passed out from exhaustion. But then something shifted. Not much, just a tremor beneath the rock. The faintest grind of movement. My pulse spiked. I repositioned the belt, wedged it tighter, and heaved. My muscles felt like they were tearing apart, my vision dimming around the edges. But I didn't stop. I screamed through clenched teeth, the sound raw and animal. And then a crack. A small one. The stone moved just enough for air to rush around it. I pulled again, using my entire body. Every nerve, every ounce of hate and desperation poured into that one motion. Finally, the rock gave. It didn't roll. It slumped, scraping along my arm as it fell to the ground with a dull thud. I collapsed forward, gasping like I'd been underwater. The freedom felt unreal. I was shaking, bleeding, half delirious, but alive. I crawled out of the narrow gap, my knees slipping on sand and dust. The air outside the crack was different, cooler, open, alive. I dragged myself toward the mouth of the cave, my hands trembling, my throat rasping like dry paper. When I finally reached the exit, the sun was rising, a thin red line bleeding across the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly before me, silent and cruel. The light was beautiful in that cold way death can be beautiful. I stumbled out into it. The heat hit me instantly, sucking the last moisture from my skin. Every step burned. My shoes were torn, my feet blistered. The rocks cut into me. The wind sliced my face. I didn't care. I was free. The first day blurred. I remember seeing the shimmer of the highway far in the distance, but I couldn't reach it. My mind played tricks on me, mirages of Claire walking ahead, looking over her shoulder with that same indifferent expression. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she didn't. I tried to speak to her, but every word turned into sand. By the second night, I could barely stand. My body was a map of bruises and cuts. My throat felt like it had been lined with glass. I stumbled through the dark, guided only by starlight and stubbornness. Coyotes howled somewhere in the distance, their cries weaving through the wind. I thought about her, how she'd planned it. The calmness, the detachment, the way she dropped the flashlight like it meant nothing. She didn't just leave me. She made sure I couldn't follow. That thought burned brighter than thirst. It kept me moving. When I finally reached the roadside, my legs gave out. I collapsed face first into the dust. The last thing I saw before everything went black was a faint set of headlights cresting the hill. When I woke again, everything was white, sheets, walls, ceiling. The smell of antiseptic filled my lungs. A voice beside me said, "You're lucky, kid. Another hour out there, you'd have been done." I blinked up at a nurse, her face half hidden behind a mask. My body was wrapped in bandages, my skin tight with burns and blisters. I could barely move. My voice cracked. "Where am I?" "Paige," she said. "Arizona. Some trucker found you on the highway. Said you were crawling." Crawling. The word made me shiver. I'd been an inch from death, dragging myself through the sand like an animal. They told me I'd been missing for 3 days. I told them I got lost hiking, that my girlfriend went for help and never came back. They believed me. The police filed it as a hiker separation, the kind that happens too often out here. I didn't correct them. When they discharged me a few days later, they said I was lucky. But luck wasn't what I felt. I felt raw, reborn in pain. Claire had wanted me to vanish into the desert. Instead, I crawled out of it. And if the desert could teach me how to survive, it could teach me something else too, how to wait. Because I wasn't going to die. Not until she understood what it felt like to be left in the dark, begging for mercy that would never come. The first thing I noticed after waking in the hospital wasn't the pain. It was the silence, clean, sterile, almost kind. No wind, no sand, no echoes of my own voice bouncing off stone walls. The desert had been loud in its emptiness. This place was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. I stared at the white ceiling, blinking under the fluorescent light. Every muscle ached. My throat was torn raw, my lips split and bleeding. A nurse came in and smiled when she saw me awake. "You're one lucky man," she said, checking my IV. "They found you just in time." I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow. Over the next few days, I learned how close I'd come. Severe dehydration, second-degree burns, torn ligaments in my shoulder. The doctors said I'd been wandering for at least 2 nights after escaping the cave, my body running purely on adrenaline. I told them I'd gotten lost, that my girlfriend had gone for help and must have taken the wrong path. They nodded sympathetically. They believed me. They didn't need to know the truth. Not yet. When I was finally discharged, they gave me a bottle of antibiotics, a list of aftercare instructions, and a ride to a motel. I checked into a small room near the edge of Paige, beige walls, flickering lights, a humming air conditioner that sounded like it was dying. The bed smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke. I stood under the shower for what felt like hours, watching dirt and dried blood spiral down the drain. My skin was raw, but I kept scrubbing. I couldn't shake the feeling of the cave clinging to me, its silence, its weight, her absence. That night, I sat on the bed, staring at my phone. The screen glowed like a tiny window to another world. Messages from friends, coworkers, and one from my sister, all asking the same thing. Where have you been? Not a single message from Claire. I checked her profile. Her last activity was 3 days ago, a photo posted from Los Angeles. A beach. A glass of wine. Her smile. She looked alive, radiant, untouched by guilt or fear. My chest tightened. She'd moved on already, as if I were just another chapter she closed. I zoomed in on the reflection in her sunglasses. A man's arm around her shoulders. Dylan Hayes, her boss, her lover, the man she'd chosen to destroy me for. I laughed, a bitter broken sound. So that's it, I whispered. You left me in the dark so you could walk into the sun. I wanted to throw the phone, but I didn't. I needed it. I needed her digital shadow. Over the next few days, I healed. Physically at least. I ate, slept, stared at the ceiling. My burns scabbed over, my strength returned. But my mind wouldn't rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the moment she dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning, fading, dying. I remembered her calm voice saying, this trip was a goodbye. She'd meant it literally. I started tracking her movements. It wasn't hard. Her bank card still connected to our old shared account, one she'd apparently forgotten to close. I saw transactions in Los Angeles, a cafe in Santa Monica, a luxury boutique in Beverly Hills, a charge at a hotel under Dylan Hayes' corporate name. She wasn't hiding. She didn't think I was alive. I smiled at that. For the first time in weeks, I smiled, not out of joy, but out of purpose. I spent the next morning planning. I bought a used car with cash I'd saved, packed a duffel bag, and hit the road. The desert faded behind me, replaced by the sprawl of highways, billboards, and noise. The farther I got from Arizona, the less human everything felt. Civilization was a machine, polished, efficient, soulless. When I crossed into California, I pulled into a rest stop and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was thinner, my eyes darker, my skin still streaked with faint lines where the burns had healed. I didn't recognize the man staring back. Maybe that was a good thing. By the time I reached Los Angeles, it was dusk. The skyline shimmered under a haze of gold and smoke. The city pulsed, loud, alive, unfeeling. People moved like blood through veins of asphalt, rushing toward meaningless destinations. I found a cheap motel near Culver City and checked in under a different name. The clerk didn't ask questions. He didn't care. That night, I sat on the balcony, watching headlights streak across the freeway. Somewhere out there, she was laughing. Maybe in his bed. Maybe in some expensive restaurant. Maybe whispering his name the way she used to whisper mine. I tried to imagine confronting her, what I'd say, how she'd look at me. Would she scream? Apologize? Cry? None of it mattered. Words couldn't undo what she'd done. I wasn't the man she left behind in that cave anymore. The desert had stripped him away, burned him to dust and bone. What crawled out of that rock wasn't just me. It was something new, something patient. I opened my laptop and searched for Dylan Hayes, CEO of a mid-tier consulting firm, married, a daughter, publicly charming, privately corrupt. I'd heard stories before, whispers from old contacts. He was the kind of man who made enemies quietly and destroyed them elegantly. Perfect. As the city lights bled into the horizon, I leaned back and whispered to myself, "You both thought I'd die out there. You should have made sure. Tomorrow I'd start again, a new name, a new job, a new purpose." I didn't just want revenge. I wanted them to feel it. The suffocation, the silence, the dark pressing in from all sides. I wanted them to know what it meant to be buried alive. Los Angeles doesn't sleep. It hums, pulses, breathes like a body that refuses to rest. Even in the dead of night, the city glows, pale blue neon, flickering reds, headlights cutting through fog. I used to think cities meant safety. After the desert, though, it all felt hollow. A different kind of wilderness, one that hides its predators behind glass. I spent my first week in the city watching her. Not directly. Not yet. I had patience now, carved into me by stone and hunger. I found her easily. People like Claire always leave breadcrumbs. Her new office downtown had Dylan Hayes' name on the door. Sleek glass walls, polished marble floors, everything too perfect. The kind of place where truth doesn't belong. I started small. I followed her schedule online through the company site, through photos tagged at networking events. She looked the same, radiant, confident. She'd cut her hair shorter, darker, maybe to look more professional. Her smile in those photos was the same one she'd given me years ago when she said she loved me. Only now I could see it for what it was, a performance. The first time I saw her in person again, my heart nearly stopped. She was walking out of the building, laughing, holding a folder against her chest. Dylan was beside her, taller than me, slick suit, that smug ease of a man who's never had to crawl for anything. His hand brushed her lower back, a small gesture, but it burned through me like acid. I stayed across the street, blending with the flow of strangers. My pulse pounded. She looked happy. Not haunted, not guilty, happy. That's when I knew. To them, I was gone. Dead. Buried in sand and silence. Good. That meant I could move without being seen. I rented a small room in a shared house near Westwood, paid cash, no questions. Then I started to build. A fake identity, a work history, a resume tailored for one purpose, getting close to Dylan Hayes. It didn't take long. A technician position opened at his firm, IT support. Entry level, low profile. Perfect. They hired me after one brief interview. Dylan never looked at me twice. Claire didn't even notice me that first week. I was just another background face fixing routers, installing updates, checking systems. But I watched. Every day, I learned something new, her habits, her passwords, the way she laughed too loudly at his jokes, the way she leaned into him when no one was looking. I watched her fingers trail along his sleeve, subtle, careful, trained. It made my stomach twist, but I didn't look away. I wanted to remember everything. She didn't see me, but once she paused near my desk. Her perfume hit me before her voice did. The same scent she used to wear when we'd go out, warm and citrusy with a hint of spice. For a second, I almost forgot myself. "Hi," she said absently. "You're new, right?" I looked up, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah, Ethan." The name burned on my tongue. She didn't even flinch. Of course she didn't. She thought Ethan was dead. "Well, welcome aboard," she said with a smile. "If you ever need help with the system passwords, talk to me. I handle most of the admin stuff." She walked away, her heels clicking down the hallway, leaving that scent behind, that ghost of what I'd lost. It took everything in me not to follow her, not to tell her who I was. But this wasn't the moment. Not yet. Instead, I started collecting data, quietly, methodically. I accessed server logs, employee emails, internal files. Dylan Hayes ran his company like a king in his castle, but even kings forget to lock the gates. Financial records, personal correspondences, bribes disguised as consulting fees. It was all there, buried beneath layers of polished professionalism. The more I found, the colder I became. Claire was deep in it too, helping hide transactions, falsifying reports. She wasn't an innocent bystander in his world. She was his accomplice. That realization cut deeper than the betrayal itself. She hadn't fallen in love. She'd fallen into corruption, and she liked it. One night, as I sat in the dark of my rented room, the city murmuring outside, I stared at the screen filled with evidence. Bank transfers, encrypted messages, names, dates, numbers that would ruin them both. I could have sent it all right then, to the authorities, to the press, to anyone who'd listen. But that would have been too easy, too clean. No, I wanted them to feel it. The slow unraveling, the creeping dread of realizing everything they'd built was crumbling from within. The same dread I'd felt in that cave when I knew Claire wasn't coming back. Over the following weeks, I watched Dylan's confidence begin to crack. Small things at first. An email leaked here, a client suddenly backing out of a deal, rumors spreading online. Claire looked more anxious by the day, though she hid it well. Sometimes, when I passed her in the hallway, our eyes met. Something in her would flicker, confusion, unease, like a memory she couldn't quite name. She'd tilt her head slightly, studying me. "You remind me of someone," she said once. "Do I?" I answered, smiling faintly. "Maybe just a familiar face." She nodded, but her gaze lingered a moment too long. Then she walked away. I waited until she was gone before I let my smile fade. Every move she made, every email she sent, every lie she told, I was there watching, recording, waiting. The truth was a shadow now, creeping closer with each passing day. And when it finally reached her, she'd realize what I already knew. You can't bury someone in the dark and expect them to stay there. Revenge, I discovered, isn't an explosion. It's erosion. Slow, deliberate, inevitable. Each morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else. The place smelled of disinfectant and ambition. Glass walls polished, so clean they reflected everything except the truth. Dylan Hayes ran the firm like a god among men, and Claire, always at his side, was the devoted disciple. She carried his coffee, his secrets, his sins. But now I carried theirs too. I had every password, every private server path memorized. My small technician badge was a key to everything. Nobody questioned the IT guy in the corner. They just nodded politely and went back to pretending their empire wasn't rotting. At night, I worked in the glow of my laptop. No music, no noise, just the rhythm of my breathing and the hum of the city outside. I pieced together the puzzle of their corruption. The shell companies, the forged invoices, the contracts that hid bribes under consultation fees. The firm was a mirage. Dylan's arrogance was my weapon. He'd grown too comfortable, too untouchable. I knew when he met clients, where he kept backups, and which accounts were tied to offshore transfers. I built a map of their deceit, line by line. And then I started pulling threads. The first leak was small, a single anonymous email sent to an investigative journalist. Nothing explosive, just enough to raise suspicion. A transfer between Dylan's company and a government contractor. The story barely made the back pages, but it planted a seed. 2 weeks later, I sent another, a string of internal emails hinting at insider trading. The journalist dug deeper. The whispers grew louder. Clients began to hesitate. Investors called for meetings. Dylan's confident smile started to falter. Claire noticed it before he did. She was sharp like that. I'd see it in her eyes. The flicker of unease when a rumor reached her desk. The tension in her shoulders as she checked her phone. Once, I passed her office late at night and caught her sitting there alone, staring at her reflection in the dark window. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered her face in the cave, calm, detached, watching me struggle. The memory turned pity into focus. Every week, I fed the storm. Anonymous accounts, encrypted leaks, whispers disguised as coincidences. I left traces that led nowhere, creating confusion, paranoia. Dylan began yelling in meetings, accusing his partners of betrayal. Claire tried to keep him calm, but the cracks were spreading faster than she could patch them. One night, I saw them arguing in the parking garage. I stayed hidden behind a pillar, watching the fight play out in sharp bursts of light from the street lamps. "You think someone inside's doing this?" she said, voice shaking. "It's someone close," Dylan snapped. "Too close. You've been sloppy, Claire." "Me? You're the one who—" "Don't," he hissed, stepping closer. "Don't forget who saved your ass when you forged those numbers." She flinched. And there it was, the truth between them. She wasn't just his lover. She was his liability. I watched him grab her arm, his fingers digging in. "You'll fix this," he said, "or we both burn." When he walked away, she leaned against her car, trembling. For the first time, I saw her afraid. Not of losing him, but of losing everything. That was when I knew I'd done enough damage to let gravity do the rest. Over the next month, I made the leaks louder, faster, impossible to ignore. Financial misconduct, tax evasion, political bribery. The internet devoured every fragment, hungry for scandal. By the time the authorities started investigating, Dylan was already drowning in lawsuits. His empire was collapsing from within. Investors gone, clients vanished, employees resigning in waves. Claire tried to reach him, to save what was left. But every time she tried, another truth surfaced. Emails she thought were deleted. Recordings she didn't remember making. Documents traced to her account. I made sure of that. Her world was burning now, just like mine had once. One morning, I watched from across the street as the police arrived at the firm. Dylan was led out in handcuffs, shouting, his face pale with disbelief. Claire stood frozen near the entrance, her hands shaking. The cameras caught everything, the scandal, the humiliation, the downfall. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I didn't need to. The sound of her voice from that cave still echoed in my head. This trip was a goodbye. Well, this was mine. That night, I drove out to the coast. The city lights shimmered behind me like dying embers. I parked near the cliffs, watching the waves crash far below. I thought of her, of the warmth that used to live between us, the way her skin used to taste, the sound she made when she whispered my name in the dark. Those memories didn't hurt anymore. They just felt distant, like they belonged to someone else entirely. I took a small envelope from my pocket, a photo of us from years ago, back when love was still real. I tore it in half and let the pieces drift into the wind. Goodbye, Claire, I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. She'd lost everything. Yes, her career, her lover, her reputation. But I hadn't seen her face when she realized who had done it. That moment was still waiting for me. And when it came, I'd make sure she saw me clearly, the man who crawled out of the dark, and the shadow that followed her ever since. 6 months after the first leak, the empire finally crumbled. Dylan Hayes, once the face of polished ambition, now looked like a man dragged through glass. His name filled headlines, his company torn apart by investigations, his accounts frozen, his friends scattering like rats when the lights came on. The media called it the Hayes scandal, a phrase that sounded almost too small for the destruction it caused. I watched it unfold from my apartment, sitting in the dark with a cup of coffee gone cold. The television flickered with images of reporters outside his mansion, helicopters circling, words like fraud, corruption, federal indictment. And in the middle of it all, Claire. Her photo appeared beside his on every broadcast. Former executive assistant and alleged accomplice. Her smile, that perfect, curated smile, now plastered across the screen like a ghost of innocence. Her social media accounts disappeared overnight. No statements, no interviews. She'd gone silent, and for the first time in years, I liked her quiet. But I didn't stop there. When Dylan was arrested, I made sure she felt it too. I released the last piece of evidence, the one that tied her name directly to his forged accounts. Not enough to ruin her completely, but enough to make sure she'd never work again. The court didn't charge her. She was smart, legally protected. But the damage was done. No firm would touch her now. No company would risk the scandal. She'd gone from luxury to loneliness in a matter of weeks. I learned from old contacts that she sold her car, moved into a small apartment outside the city. She stopped going out. The woman who once walked through boardrooms with confidence now hid behind drawn curtains. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt the rush of justice. But I didn't. What I felt was hollow. Like all the noise I'd created had burned away everything inside me too. Some nights, I'd dream of the cave. The smell of stone. The echo of her footsteps fading. I'd wake drenched in sweat, my fingers clenched around invisible rocks, still clawing for a way out. I tried to tell myself it was over, that she'd paid, that I'd won. But victory didn't taste the way I thought it would. Revenge, once bright and electric, had turned into ash. Until one evening, I got an email. No subject line. No name. Just a message that read, "Why?" No signature, but I didn't need one. I knew her writing style, the way she always left questions open-ended, as if answers were optional. For a moment, I didn't breathe. My hands hovered over the keyboard, shaking. I could have ignored it. I should have. But instead, I typed 3 words. You left me. I didn't send it. I deleted it, closed the laptop, and poured myself another drink. But the message stayed with me, vibrating like a pulse in my mind. A week later, I drove by her apartment. Not to see her. That's what I told myself, just to know she was real, that the story hadn't ended without me. The building was small, beige, tired. The kind of place you forget exists once you walk past it. Her car wasn't there, but her light was on, a faint glow behind a half-drawn curtain. I sat in the car for nearly an hour, watching the shadow move across the room. Sometimes she'd pause, like she could feel eyes on her. When she stepped out onto the small balcony, I finally saw her clearly. Her hair longer now, a little unkempt. No makeup. No mask. She looked older, smaller, but still her. Still Claire. I wanted to get out, to walk up those steps, to make her see me, to make her understand what she'd done. But something inside me stopped. The same instinct that had kept me alive in the desert, the part that knows when to wait. She wasn't ready yet. That night, I left an envelope at her door. No return address, no explanation. Inside was a single photograph, me, standing at the mouth of the cave, the light behind me painting my silhouette against a stone. On the back, I'd written just one line. I got out. You didn't. I imagined her finding it the next morning, her fingers trembling as she turned it over, the blood draining from her face as realization sank in. I wanted to be there to see it, but I wasn't. I didn't need to be. The next day, the news reported that Dylan Hayes had been denied bail. The story was over. The world moved on. But I didn't. I started driving again, long stretches of highway, empty desert roads. I told myself I was chasing freedom, but it felt more like being haunted by it. The world outside the windshield blurred, sky and sand melting together like a memory refusing to fade. Sometimes I'd imagine Claire sitting in that apartment, staring at the photograph, wondering how long I'd been watching. Maybe she slept with the lights on now. Maybe she checked the locks twice before bed. Maybe, finally, she knew what it felt like to be trapped. As the miles rolled beneath my tires, I realized something. The cave had never really let me go. I'd carried it with me, its silence, its darkness, its weight. And maybe that was the real revenge. She'd left me buried in stone, but I was the one who learned how to live there. Now, it was her turn to suffocate in the open air. A year had passed since the cave. Sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, I still expected to see the man who'd gone into it. Naive, hopeful, desperate for love. But he was long gone. The person who looked back at me now had eyes like dry stone and a heartbeat that moved slower, quieter. I'd become part of the desert itself, patient, merciless, eternal. I hadn't planned to go back. There was no reason to. I'd done everything I'd set out to do. Claire and Dylan were dust now, relics of greed and betrayal. But something kept pulling me west again, back toward the silence that had made me. So I drove. The highway stretched endless, a silver vein through red rock and broken dreams. The closer I got to Arizona, the lighter I felt. Not freer, just empty. The kind of emptiness that feels clean, like fire after it burns everything else away. By the time I reached the canyon, the sun was already sinking. The sky bled orange and gold, streaks of violet tearing through it like scars. The air shimmered, hot and dry, carrying the faint hum of insects and wind. I parked near the same trail we'd walked that day. The same sand. The same stones. Time hadn't touched this place. It never did. The desert doesn't forgive or forget, it just waits. I started walking. My boots sank into the sand, crunching with each step. The scent of dust filled my lungs, familiar and sharp. Every rock, every curve of the path felt burned into my memory. I could still see her walking ahead of me, her hair catching the sunlight, her voice distant. The cave appeared just as I'd left it, narrow, unassuming, a mouth cut into the earth. I stood before it for a long while, staring into the dark. My reflection shimmered faintly in the shadows, as if the stone itself remembered me. Still here, I whispered. The air inside was cooler, damp with memory. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, illuminating the same walls I'd clawed against, the same jagged edges that had torn my skin. The marks were still there, faint scratches where I'd fought to live. Proof that I had existed. Proof that I'd won. I walked deeper, the echoes of my steps overlapping with the ghosts of the past. Every sound was both mine and hers. "Claire," I said quietly, tasting the name like dust. It didn't sting anymore. It just felt like an echo. At the narrow crack, the one that had almost been my tomb, I stopped. My fingertips brushed the rock, tracing the edge where her voice had faded. For a second, I almost expected to hear her again. The memory of her breath, her whisper, her final "I'm sorry." But there was nothing. Only silence. I sat down against the wall, letting the cool stone press against my back. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying sand into the mouth of the cave. The light from the entrance turned amber, then red, then dimmed entirely as the sun fell below the horizon. For the first time in a long while, I closed my eyes. I could almost feel her standing there again, not as she was, but as I remembered her before everything shattered. The woman who used to laugh with her whole body, who used to fall asleep tracing circles on my chest, whispering about the future. That version of her was long dead, buried somewhere in this canyon alongside the man she betrayed. But I didn't hate her anymore. Hate takes energy, and mine had finally burned out. What remained was something quieter, acceptance, maybe, or peace. Whatever it was, it felt like the end of something. When I opened my eyes again, night had settled. The cave was dark, but above the entrance, the stars had begun to appear, thousands of them, shimmering against the black. I stepped outside and tilted my head back, breathing in the cool air. The desert stretched endlessly before me, silent, eternal. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried, its call echoing across the valley. The sound wasn't lonely. It was alive. I walked back toward the car, the sand whispering under my feet. The world was still the same, indifferent, vast, beautiful in its cruelty. But I wasn't the same man anymore. The cave hadn't just trapped me. It had remade me. As I reached the edge of a canyon, I looked back one last time. The cave mouth was barely visible now, swallowed by shadow. "Now you know what it's like to be trapped," I said softly, the words carried by the wind. The horizon burned faintly with the last light of day. I stood there until it faded, until only the stars remained. Then I turned away, walking into the night. Each step felt lighter, the weight of her name dissolving behind me. The desert didn't care who lived, who died, or who loved who. It simply kept its secrets, mine included. And maybe that was enough. The stones would remember everything. The morning after I returned to the cave, I didn't leave right away. I sat by the entrance as dawn stretched its light across the sand, painting the world in shades of rose and amber. The wind was cold before the sun rose, brushing against my face like breath from something ancient. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the pull to move, to plan, to scheme. I just existed, quietly, between what was and what would never be again. The desert had a way of making everything small. The sky too large, the silence too complete. I'd spent so long fighting it, first for survival, then for revenge, that I'd forgotten how to just listen. Now I could hear it clearly, the pulse of wind across stone, the soft hiss of sand sliding down slopes, the faint echo of my own breathing. The desert remembered me. I could feel it. I thought of Claire again, how she used to say she loved wide open spaces because they made her feel free. I used to believe that too. But standing here now, I realized she'd misunderstood it. The desert doesn't offer freedom. It offers reflection, a mirror that shows you what you've always been, stripped of excuses. She would have hated that kind of truth. I wondered where she was now, whether she'd found peace, or if the silence I'd left behind had started to eat away at her the way it once did me. Maybe she still checked her windows at night. Maybe she still saw my shadow in her dreams. Maybe, sometimes, she whispered my name and waited for an answer that never came. Part of me wanted to see her one last time, to watch her eyes widen when she realized I was still alive, still walking the same earth she tried to bury me under. But what would that change? I'd already won, if winning even meant anything anymore. No, this wasn't about her anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This was about me, and what the desert had made of me. I stood and walked along the ridge, the sand crunching softly under my boots. The sun was climbing higher now, burning away the chill, setting the rocks ablaze with light. Each breath tasted like dust and heat and memory. There were no trails here, not anymore. The wind had erased them long ago. Our footprints, our mistakes, our choices, all gone, scattered across miles of stone. I stopped at a ledge overlooking the valley. The canyon spread out beneath me, red and gold, carved by time and silence. I closed my eyes, remembering the sound of her voice fading behind the rock, the weight of it pressing into my bones. I thought dying there would be the end of me. But it had been a beginning, a cruel, necessary one. I had learned how far a man could fall before he found something unbreakable inside himself. Survival had been my first act. Revenge my second. Now, maybe this was my last. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the last thing I owned that tied me to her. A small silver bracelet she'd once given me for my birthday. She'd laughed when she clasped it around my wrist, saying, "So you'll never forget me." For a long time, I hadn't. The metal was tarnished now, scratched from years of wear. I turned it over in my hand, then drew my arm back and threw it as far as I could. It caught the sunlight once before vanishing into the canyon below. The sound it made when it hit stone was small final. A part of me went with it. I stood there until the wind grew stronger, tugging at my clothes, whispering against my skin. It almost sounded like a voice, soft, wordless, eternal. I didn't need to understand what it said. The desert had already told me everything I needed to know. That nothing lasts. That love can turn to stone. That even the deepest wounds can harden into strength. When I finally turned to leave, I didn't look back. Some ghosts don't deserve a farewell. I walked toward the horizon, where the sky met the earth in a thin, blinding line. The sun climbed higher, heat rolling off the sand and waves. My shadow stretched long behind me, a dark figure on a golden canvas, fading slowly with each step. By noon, the cave was nothing more than a shape swallowed by light. By evening, even that was gone. I drove until the desert gave way to open road. I didn't know where I was heading, and for the first time, I didn't need to. Maybe somewhere quiet. Maybe somewhere that didn't know my name. The past had burned itself clean. There was nothing left to bury. As the sun dipped low and bled across the horizon, I rolled down the window. The air rushed in warm, dry, familiar. The desert was behind me now, but I could still feel its heartbeat under my skin. I smiled, a small, tired thing. Let the world forget the story of Ethan and Claire. Let the desert keep its secret. Because some truths aren't meant to be told, only remembered by the wind, carried across the sand until even that fades. And somewhere out there, beneath those endless red stones, the echoes of our voices still linger. Mine defiant, hers fading, both swallowed by the earth that made us.